My name's Sam. Thanks for the intro, Richard. I'm head of design at Versantus, and yes, I've been designing websites since around about 1996, which seems like a very long time ago, and I had to dust off some really old hard drives and even a zip drive for this presentation. So I'm going to talk tonight about sort of how the last 20 years have changed website design, and is it for the better? Has design changed for the better? So we're going to sort of talk about that over the next half an hour. Product design, digital product design, what is that? Well, I mean, it's not this. This is a physical product I designed many moons ago, about a decade ago, a golf bag with detachable wheels and a extendable handle. It was all the rage before batteries got a lot smaller and everyone started using motorised golf carts to go everywhere, but it did quite well on the international circuit. And then I also did this, which was an adjustable height standing desk, which used no glue or screws or anything else like that to hold itself together. That did very well too, but they're physical products. And I think all digital designers can actually really learn something from putting physical products together. The whole prototyping stages, the iterations, the working out what doesn't work and what does work. And these things apply to digital design as much as they do to physical product design. So now at Versantus we get to design lovely things like this. We're blessed to do lots and lots of lovely work for the University of Oxford. And this recently went live a few months ago, which was the Department of Physics website. Got to have some incredible meetings with some incredibly intelligent astrophysicists and stuff like that. I have never felt so out of depth in a meeting ever. And we're also lucky to work in the electric vehicle space. This is a user interface we put together for charging electric buses in Manchester. Manchester are currently in the process of changing all of their buses to electric vehicles. And this helps them organise which ones need juice and which ones don't, and tell the shunters which way to do stuff. So we also do a lot of app work as well. This is a web app for a parking company that allows you to pay for your mobile parking by your telephone bill. Because believe it or not everyone has a bank account. So how do you pay for parking if you haven't got a bank account these days in the modern age? So you can do that. But what we try and do is actually make our user interfaces a little bit more interesting. And like guys in bus depots are used to seeing spreadsheets and bits of paper. We went to Sharston Depot and saw the oily rags and all of that kind of stuff, and actually gave them something special that they'd like to look at. And the same with the parking app. Why not make it look like a parking ticket? So I'm going to rewind to 1998 when this wonderful device came out, the Apple iMac G3. It kind of changed the way we view websites forever, really. Not because it had a high resolution screen, because it doesn't. Not because it had lots of memory, because it doesn't. But it had a good processor, so it was able to play stuff that your old 486 wouldn't do, and things like that. So it ran this wonderful operating system, the old classic iOS 9. It was really sort of great stuff back then. But I'm not going to show you my 1996 website design because nobody needs to see that and make your eyes bleed. But in 1999, I produced this wonderful thing for a company near here in Sheffield who made masking tape and masking plugs. It was really exciting. But the logo was animated. I couldn't find the original files, unfortunately, so this is just a screen grab. But the logo was animated. It used frames. It even used the marquee tag to make this bit of text scroll across the screen. It's absolutely fantastic. But I kind of got really passionate about it. My favourite thing about that last website was the animated logo. So I started looking at Macromedia Flash before Adobe bought it, when it was good, and really wanted to start designing my own it got me really interested in animation and how we could use that on the web, and actually could you use this tool to build a website? And the answer was yes. In 2000 and roughly 2002 was when I first launched this website for the design company I ran back then. This was a completely Flash website. So, unfortunately, Flash Player doesn't run on anything these days, so I had to do a video of it. But it rewarded the user as you navigated around the website with another layer of the music track. All of the portfolio items were on one screen that scrolled together. And I was able to put all of this together without any programming knowledge. I downloaded Flash, I did a tutorial, I learned how to do this. That was, you know, I'm not saying it took me 5 minutes, it took me a lot of late nights to put it together, but it worked really, really well, and it was an exciting and interactive experience. And actually we ended up cloning this website and the whole concept behind it for lots of different people. So I was actually inspired by that, in part by Joshua Davis. But in 2001, his website, PlayStation, was one of my favourite websites at the time. It looked like nothing else out there. It ran completely on Flash. And the user interface allowed people to do algorithmic art just by clicking on a few things on the page and create their own art. It was a really, really inspirational interface. And he's still doing this kind of stuff now. He does, he calls himself an algorithmic artist and does work with artists like Deadmau5 for live music performances and that kind of stuff. And also, one of my other big inspirations of the time was a website called Too Advanced. It's a monster of a website. It just came to life as soon as you loaded it up. The interface looked tactile, like you could touch it, and it all sort of seemed to belong in a sci-fi movie. It was one of my favourite websites of the time because of its ambition. It really combined audio and design and animation really, really well. Also, Flash website. So while this was going on, I mean, this guy influenced like modern fantasy UI as we know it today. So him and J.Z. Hansen came up together at the same time and influenced each other's work quite a lot. And you've probably no doubt seen the heads-up display of Iron Man and other similar Marvel movies that J.Z. Hansen works on. And his work was kind of heavily influenced by Eric Jordan, who did Too Advanced. And their work looks incredibly similar now today. So while all this was going on, back in 2003, MySpace looked like this. Blue links, blue URLs, blocky. I mean, it was a page for people to build their own websites, but it didn't look anything like Too Advanced, nowhere near as good. And then 2004, so we're a full year on, and this is what BBC News looks like. It's pretty much the same. Except there's a lot more going on. And the news was dismal then as well. And in 2004, this is Apple. Okay, we've got some more white space going on. We've got some gradients. We've got some outlines, but we've still got, actually a bit further down the page, we've actually still got some blue hyperlinks, and it's just, it doesn't feel like Too Advanced felt. It doesn't feel like PlayStation felt. So, why? Why did these websites look like that and not like the other ones? Well, these didn't use Flash for a start, but the main reason was this. The principle of least astonishment, or my favourite acronym for it is LOSS. So, which is actually the law of least surprise. So the law of least surprise came up first in the late 70s in the MIT newsletter when discussing operating systems. So the reason for the law of least surprise was basically all it means is give the user what they're expecting. If you're putting a recipes program together and somebody clicks on fish, don't show them desserts. It's as simple as that. It seemed obvious, but it was important to write this down and give it a rule that everybody had to follow, because otherwise it would be chaos. So, MySpace, BBC, Apple, they had millions of users at the time. They were getting up to those numbers. There was a lot of traffic. And the hardware that they were using and the ability of the users all needed to be taken into account. not all of these people were going to have nice, shiny G3 iMacs or anything else with that equivalent kind of power. But what they needed to do was deliver a website that was actually going to work for everybody, which was why those user interfaces started to look so samey. So the designs had to be inclusive, and they got to work for users of all ability. So that's why they ended up looking a little bit more like this. But things were about to get worse and a bit more difficult as well. So in early 2001, I bought myself one of these. I could play games on it. It was a rather good golf game. Not that I play golf. I mean, I designed a golf bag, but I don't play golf. But it was a good game. You could browse the web on it, but that doesn't actually look like a good experience either. You could do spreadsheets on it. Nobody likes spreadsheets. And but what I could do on it, which is the most exciting thing about it, was to install Flash on it. So I started in 2001 developing my own apps. Well, I call them apps. Buttons that play a fart noise. That's about as far as I got with it. But it meant I could play around with that kind of mobile experience. But then, on January 9th, at 9:41 in the morning, in 2007, it all went wrong. Because this came out. The iPhone 1. It promised, it delivered a really great web browsing experience on a mobile device. Except that there was no Flash involved in that, so my websites that I loved, I couldn't view on this device. They wouldn't even come up. But it also was the introduction of the app, which would replace that experience, would give people that rich interface. But you needed to be a developer to create an app. I wasn't a developer. I could use Flash. I didn't know code. I didn't know how to build apps. So there was a bit of a divide starting up. So like most people, and then it was like Flash wasn't going to work anymore. We couldn't build websites in Flash. It wasn't going to be supported. We needed them to work on the shiny new iPhone that everyone was buying. So we turned to WordPress. It was a content management system that was easy for people to update. Flash was terrible. Even the developers that created Flash websites had trouble updating it. Whereas WordPress was easy to update. You didn't need to install any plugins in your browser to run it. But what it meant was all those nice Notion graphics just gave way to easy editing, to CSS, to HTML, to PHP. All of that interesting stuff that we were starting to do with Flash just started to fade away into distant memory. But I can't blame WordPress entirely. But I can blame WordPress for this. The theme library, the theme forest, get a theme for 20 quid and install it on WordPress. Everybody was doing it. It was a super fast way to deliver a website. And throughout the sort of kind of late 2009, kind of 2010 area, like, websites were just starting to look like this everywhere. But I still couldn't blame WordPress for this. It's actually Twitter's fault. So Twitter in 2010 released Bootstrap, a framework for building websites that made all of those kind of mistakes that you would make as a web designer impossible to make. It sorted out grid layouts, it sorted out typography, it sorted out responsivity. It would work on an iPhone and it would work on your desktop. And Twitter used it internally so successfully that they released it out into the wild, and then everybody took it on. And websites still kind of look the same. And it wasn't difficult to make a Bootstrap website that looked completely different to every other website out there, but it was just too easy to make them look like this. There was a hero image, there was a menu, there was a 3-column grid with icons on the top. It's going to look fantastic. So everybody jumped on board. But it wasn't just Bootstrap. Things like jQuery, Font Awesome, Unsplash, probably a little bit later, but all these things were coming on board, and they were changing the language, the visual language of websites, because they made it really easy to build a website. And jQuery would give you all of the accordions, the carousels, all those little interactive bits. Font Awesomes would give you hundreds of thousands of kind of iconography that would be really easy to implement into a project. And now Unsplash gives us loads and loads of high-quality images for free. And now you see it everywhere. And it's really, really getting used. And as a designer, it's becoming very difficult to build a website effectively and efficiently without turning to these tools. So it was kind of stopping our creative expression a little bit. Now, on sites like PlayStation and 2 Advanced, those guys were the developers and the designers. And they were blazing a trail, doing stuff that nobody had ever done before. But it's really difficult to blaze a trail when you're faced with something like this. Oh, that's a pug, or it could be Yoda, or Pagoda. I'm really sorry. Actually, what I wanted to talk about was W3C. So the World Wide Web Consortium launched in 1994 to keep all unruly web designers in check. Well, that's the way I do it anyway. But they're there to make sure that websites are usable by everybody, to make sure that the standards are followed and the rules are followed, and they help intrinsically with the development of new software and browser technology that makes the web a better place to be. But they also have accessibility standards. The WCAG 2.1 AA standard is actually now required. Any public service website or education website has to adhere to this standard by law. They can't have a website that doesn't follow these rules. And those rules are things like color contrast, typography size, labeling. They call it POUR, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So basically, you've got to be able to know what it is. You've got to be able to use it no matter what your ability, whether you're blind and using a screen reader, whether you're colorblind and can't see green on the screen. You've got to be able to, whatever you build has to meet these standards. And you've got to understand it as well. It's got to talk back to you. It's got to inform your decisions on what button to click or what form to fill in. It's got to be robust. It can't fall apart. It can't fail. Whatever you put together has to work. And building a website to these standards is actually surprisingly difficult, especially if you're using some of these frameworks that I was talking about earlier on, things like WordPress and that kind of stuff. So it takes considerable design thinking to make a unique website that still meets these standards. So how can digital designers remain creative in the face of adversity? And how can we keep all of our websites looking unique? So I'm like talking to some of our design team. I say kind of look outside of it. Take your inspiration not just from the web. Create art, take photos, go to a science lecture, brew some beer, do things that step outside of the normal remit and look elsewhere. And it may not seem obvious, but doing things like that will feed into your subconscious and will be able to deliver a more rounded kind of design experience. Now, designers these days, I don't know which one's the designer. Let's call Batman the designer. That's because I'm the designer. We'll call Batman the designer and Robin the developer. So designers and developers need to work in harmony. They need to be more like the dynamic duo and have a better partnership. Actually, they're probably not a good example. It's a very uneven partnership. But they need to work more together. So designers can learn so much from developers. And the creativity happens on both sides. And developers can learn from designers as well. And we need to team up more. Back in the days of PlayStation 2 Advanced, the designer and the developer was often the same thing. I mean, technologists and designers were still apart, but there was more people doing all of it all at the same time. But now technology has come on so far that the divide is much greater. And the best designers are the ones that design, and the best developers are the ones that code. So, but working as a team, they can be a super powerhouse and put some really good stuff together. And also, they can sort of harness all of these frameworks that are out there and use them for the greater good. There are so many frameworks out there now. And I made the point earlier that it was the frameworks that were causing websites to look a bit samey. Well, actually, there are so many out there that the opportunity for creative expression using these tools is far greater than it ever has been, and that's just getting better and better and better. And what gives me a little bit of hope as a designer with poor coding ability is tools like Makeswift. Makeswift has recently been released as a no-code environment that delivers headless Next.js websites, which some people might know what that means, and other people say, well, it is mostly mine. But what it does mean is that as a designer, I can use tools like this to express myself creatively without having to spend loads of time trying to learn new code and things like that. And then I can take my work of art to the developer, and then they can turn it into something awesome that works fantastically. And it kind of harks back a little bit to the Flash kind of days, and I've got a lot of hope for no-code tools, and I'm really keen on exploring where they go to. Makeswift's going to be my kind of next option. Proviso I don't have anything to do with Makeswift, I just quite like their product. So the other thing is to keep an eye on trends. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I think is really good on the web today. And not because I want people to copy it, but it's inspirational stuff for a variety of reasons. You might recall I showed you 2004 BBC website. This is the BBC website today, actually this afternoon. It's dull. It's really, really dull. But what it is amazingly usable. The BBC do not to be fair to the BBC, they do a fantastic job of their microsites, and it's their content that entertains. It's their content that's magnificent and not mediocre. So they put together the best framework for that, and they take into account a much, much wider user audience than some of the other websites that I've shown, and some of the other websites I'm about to show. But for the widest user audience, everybody knows this website. Now, I've been fortunate enough to work over the last few years on a few government projects and got to know gov.uk's ins and outs and their design system a little bit more, and I'm very, very impressed by it. Now, a lot of people might hate using this website, because usually you only come here to do boring things or things you don't want to do, but they've done an amazing job on usability, on typography, on accessibility, and the design standards are fantastic. And I think anybody can actually go to gov.uk and download their framework and have a go with it and try it out for themselves. Slightly more interesting, this is kind of my favourite website of 2021, is the new, this is the beta, but I don't know, it might actually not be in beta anymore, it was a few weeks ago. This is the New York City live subway map. In the 70s, I don't know if you can see it on the contrast from the screen, from this angle I can't see it, but underneath the lines is actually the topographical map of New York, Manhattan Island. And in the 70s, they released a tube map that actually was geographically accurate, but it was a maze of lines that nobody could understand. And then 10 years later, they redesigned it to look a bit more like the London Underground. So it was very graphical lines that just went here, there, and everywhere, but nobody understood it. And it stayed like that for decades until in the last year, a design company off their own back built this entire system pro bono because they hated the fact they couldn't understand their own tube manual. See these darker marks? These are the trains moving into the station. So this is a fantastic experience on a mobile phone as well. You can open this on a phone, and as you're standing on the platform, watch your train come in. Very slowly. The scale is massive, so it's very slow. But it's absolutely fantastic bit of tech. One of my favourite websites in 2021. We're really lucky at Versantus to do lots of work in the EV space. So when anything new comes out in the kind of electric vehicle space, kind of all over it. And this company Zoox make a autonomous electric vehicle, but their website just reacts beautifully when you scroll it. It uses a bit of technology called green stock, which we love playing with, and which means that as you scroll up and down the screen, you can then choose that aspects of the page to interact with. But this is the US Air Force E.C.H.O, and the reason I put this one up is one big thing about producing magnificent design is produce it for your audience. So the only blind positions given to the US Air Force after doing my research is that they make uniforms for the US Air Force. But other than that, even if you're slightly colourblind, don't bother applying. So when the US Air Force put together Air Force E.C.H.O, which is this enhanced cognitive human ops website, they didn't need to worry too much about the accessibility standards and usability standards that the BBC do. So they could go all out. Lovely interactive effects, sound and motion design, all thanks to frameworks like 3JS, which makes this kind of stuff possible.
Welcome to E.C.H.O, the Air Force's enhanced cognitive human ops. I will be your guide. To be an airman, you must have exceptional cognitive skills, such as focus, composure, and reaction. Today, we'll identify your strengths and help develop them even further.
This doesn't use
This first challenge will test
Now,
your
I
reaction.
screen recorded this, so it's a little bit slower. But I encourage everybody to, if you want a really stressful 10 minutes, then go and do these tests. They are so bonkers. I didn't know a website could raise my heart rate in such a way.
Into position to catch the spears. For the dark spears, make sure your reticle
But you
is
kind of get the
to catch
get the
light
impression.
spears. Hold down the space bar.
So is it easy to balance sort of mediocre design against magnificent design? No, it's not. There's a lot of hurdles to jump into. But the web has become a far better place for all of these standards being in place. And it is possible to create beautiful design and stay within those standards. But know your audience. Do it for the people that are going to look at your stuff. And if you see the law of least surprise getting in your way, give it a tickle and see what happens. And I'm Sam from Versantus. Thank you ever so much for your time, and it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you.